So welcome,
Thank you.
everybody, to the Circular Fashion 2050. My name is Shamini Dhana, and I'm the founder and CEO of Dhana Inc. Today, we have amazing discussion and a featured speaker, which is Cassell Ferere, and he's joining us from New York. Hello, Cassell.
How you doing? I hope everyone can't hear the bus going by every now and then, but yeah, that's how New York City is on a normal day. But thank you for having me. I'm Cassell, founder of Reverie page, style editor and creative director of Kulture Hub, and contributor to Forbes.com, all in the area of fashion and sustainability, and branching out inclusive conversations around that.
Excellent. So it's great to have you here, Cassell. Let me give you some context as well as the audience. Dhana Inc. is in partnership with New Chip Accelerator, which is a global accelerator program that has funded over 150 million startups. The accelerator is geared towards helping startups and founders build, scale global technology companies, as well as other industries in global markets. We are doing this together because we do believe that there is a cross-intersectional need between industries when it comes to fashion. And we only have 30 more years before Circular Fashion 2050. I've been in this country now for 30 years, and I've seen how fast things have changed. But now with technology, it's exponential growth, and fashion is going through a huge metamorphosis, as well as a transformation towards the new frontier of fashion, where we see the customers being at a position where they are demanding now not only greater transparency, but being part of the game. Part of the game, meaning they want to be able to be the solution to climate and social change. And so this is our conversation in the next 30 years about the convergence of technology, the players involved, how we get customers involved as demanding these new ways of transparency or accountability. And of course, customers working with brands as well as media and folks like Cassell and your media platform, so that we can make real positive change in the world. My company, Dhana Inc., has been around for the last 12 years. We have morphed from a sustainable fashion brand to now a fashion technology company, unleashing the next frontier of fashion, where we bring in the customers so that they can co-create with value. So today's discussion, the title is Next Generation Customers Embody Circular and Sustainable Lifestyle. And what better way than for you, Cassell, to share your inspiration, your insights, your perspective. So let me start with this. One thing is, I've got to know you, is that you've held several different positions in life, from being a photographer to a model to a writer, a blogger. You've actually witnessed firsthand transition in the fashion industry. How did you get here? Tell us the story.
The story is it's a journey. It's definitely a lot of zigzags, like the meme suggests. I started out in photography, and from there, it was more about getting involved in like assisting other photographers, shooting on my own, and then moving into places where I wanted to actually work in as a photographer, which was fashion. I started working with Billionaires Boys Club and Ice Cream, which is Pharrell Williams' clothing line.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I got like kind of, it was a very boutique showroom. So it was a handful of people there. But on the other side of that, you got to see a lot of the, I guess, the promotional side of fashion. And then you get to see the results of that in, the retail side. And then, obviously working in the showroom, there's a lot of discussion around the actual fashion, the materials, where it's coming from, quality, things like that. And this was around the time that sustainable ideas and notions were limited in a sense, or they kind of weren't talked about as much on the forefront. So, you spoke about, high quality garments, and, how they were made and the fabrics used. And then you kind of disregarded more of the autonomous things, t-shirts or, items in that realm. But then you also see like the numbers and you're like, oh, this is a lot of stuff. And then you see what actually doesn't get sold and what happens to those, items and those products. And and this was around, this is normal, I guess in those days was shredding, just shred it. Like you take it to a shredder,
Mm-hmm.
you bring an auditor with you to, make sure, you're not saying you're shredding it or whatever. Yeah, like that was part of the business motto, not the business motto, but that was part of the business in general, and how, and for me, it was the next question was what happens to the shreds? Do they recycle them? What goes on? And that question kind of like was left open-ended.
Uh-huh. You actually asked the question. You were like probing, like what's going on?
Yeah. So, and granted, like now in the recent years, this has become more of a conversation. So, Reverie page is just over a year old. It kind of informed me to the idea that this is something that not only am I thinking about it, other people are thinking about it. And I was in part because I loved the Billionaires Boys Club line at the time. I was young and I was, I'm a big fan of Pharrell and his fashion sense and his creativity and, how he goes about his way. I kind of was heartbroken a lot of the times when I would hear these stories. I'm like, you're just shredding these clothes. Like, I didn't want all of it. I just, thought something was cool. And I was like, you can pass them this way. Like I could use a refreshing wardrobe, so to speak. So yeah, and it was just an experience of like, is this normal? Is this what just happens to it? I'm sure there's people that still want this stuff that can use it. I'm sure people, you see it now, people doing a lot of cool things with leftover garments, however you may have it. And, that was where I initially got the notion that sustainability was something that, it was overlooked. It was.
Can I interrupt you there? Because at that point when you were seeing them shredding, was the answer they're giving you was because they wanted to preserve the value of the clothing in terms of the pricing, or is it mostly because they didn't have a place for it to go to next? What was your understanding?
Well, from what I understood and what I saw, it was, it was just more so, it was an inventory thing where like, okay, there's a lot of stuff that they do hold on to and they do keep archived for, I guess, historical reasons. A lot of things might have some intrinsic value over time. And that's understandable. I think it was more so in that vein of, maintaining their brand value, and at that point, resale markets, it wasn't ideal. It was a place, it was eBay and Craigslist. No one liked to see their stuff on eBay. It wasn't presented well. Craigslist was a whole nother shady ordeal.
Right.
And this was the resale market. This was like, oh, where can I find this? Where can I find that? You wanted like Jordans or something. Mm-hmm. And they were, you had to risk counterfeits or, the picture being different or whatever, from the actual shoe. But yeah, no, it was more about brand protection, like I don't want to see this, just being sold on a corner, because then I would value the actual brand in the store. And that was what fashion was back then. It was more about exclusivity. It was dependent on that, and that's what created a lot of the hype market.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
the
And
hype
yet,
market
yeah,
was something of the hype market was exactly that, just an exclusive kind of deal, collaboration, something presented to the people who happen to be at the store that day or who are loyal customers. And if you knew things and you were aware and you were there, you got a lot out of I guess that kind of shopping, hyped kind of based shopping.
sure, sure.
And
And
now,
yet now we've moved from an exclusive business model. A lot of people are saying now it's inclusive, including Farrell. I mean, he's one of the biggest environmental icons now in the celebrity
I
world.
definitely pointed that out in a recent article as well too about I mean, that's why he kind of, for me, like a person like him, is kind of just drew me in, where it's just like I could take notes from this, because it was about like his music. He put out music to make you dance, feel positive. Obviously, Happy is like one of the biggest songs. Fashion wise, he was all about individuality and expression through his dress. And for one thing I noticed about Pharrell too, and it kind of threw me back about even celebrity and even just how we kind of get dressed each day. Pharrell was someone I noticed, he did not succumb to the idea that I need to change my clothes every time I'm seen, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of times where I would see him in tabloids and maybe see him somewhere else, and he would have on the same thing, same shirt, and it kind of gave me the idea. I'm like, maybe he just likes the shirt.
But it wasn't, in his mind, it wasn't taboo to be seen in more than once in a very specific shirt, which was ahead of his curve, of course, because now everyone's touting that, like, hey, I've won this 30 times and counting.
Yeah.
Right?
Like it was the idea of like, this is my favorite shirt. And I looked at it in the sense of like, when you think about it, like a child, when you get a child dressed, there's sometimes points where they just want to wear the thing they like, and that's fine. And for me, that was also a thing of like my first kind of tap into sustainability, where it was just like, what's wrong with wearing those jeans, that outfit again, if the day before was just pretty light? You took a couple of pictures, and I would see Pharrell in tabloids and the same things, and I'm just like, why are we living so much different? And he has everything at his disposal.
Yeah.
And yeah, and doing more research, finding about laundry and cleaning and the actual like effects of wearing your clothes. It's like, you wear your clothes once. If the day was pretty regular, you didn't like go to the gym in your dress shirts, you're fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Stretch, and that gave me, it kind of helped me understand, like, you can stretch the lifespan of your clothing. You didn't have to wash it as much. I wear a lot of black, obviously.
Right.
I wash black shirts a lot. They start to get, really faded. And for me, that's not the look I'm going for, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah.
It is these type of regular, everyday, kind of mundane, benign ideas around fashion that, for me, is where the problem kind of, initiates.
Right. Right.
You
and I want to grab you there, and then, because we I know we were going to talk about these things, and I mean, I would love to have Farrell online one day and say, look, you kind of started this, and Cassell has said this, and I'm sure that one T-shirt, that in one shirt, you've had many memories with that, right?
Yeah.
And that's the conversation we need to have. It's not like I've won this 30 times and counting, but I've got 30 different memories attached to this. Let's talk about this, right? That's what it is. So now that it is moving towards inclusivity, Cassell, so what happened? Where was the brink of time, and when did you start Reverie Page because this, and people, this is, I don't know whether you've seen this, but this is a fantastic first piece. This is a coffee table book that they came up with super duper enlightening pieces. When was it critical to a point where, of course, I think you were already involved with Culture Hub, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit about Culture Hub and sort of like the convergence, that you felt we were ready, or you were ready, more importantly, and the people around you were saying, there isn't anything out there, help us. What was it?
Well, I mean, the idea for Page was a senior project in school. It was, my ode to like showing that, I can produce a fashion magazine, but also I'm worthy of the magazines that exist. I kind of wanted to be a photographer for Vogue and, GQ and all that. Those are the magazines, two magazines that I read, a lot growing up. My mom would get some, magazines on her own, but then a lot of times I'm in the doctor's office, just flipping through. And that's what I would remember, about magazines. So it started from there. What cued me into where Page is now was the fact that sustainability became more of a conversation. It was just not a conversation that was had by, put it like this, it was a conversation that was it's had by the rich. Sustainable items, anything, electric cars were becoming a thing. Those are a bit more expensive, or like do you sell your old car? Like it's a conversation of like, buying sustainable items or more quality items cost money. So, people can only afford fast fashion, in a sense. And then for me, it was like it started branching down and started becoming more visible. Like more brands started coming out with sustainable projects. Sustainable brands started arriving. And then I kind of saw it as an opportunity to, in another sense, provide a voice that would be more familiar, more down to earth when talking about one, fashion, and then when talking about sustainability, because one talks over your head and then the other is often given to you in textbook form, And I love science class, I think I did pretty well in science. My teacher was pretty sad when he found out I was like a graphic design student. He was, he's like, why not biology? And I was like, it's cool, but I'm pretty squeamish after a while,
Sure.
And, I kind of wanted to merge the idea that, we can have like these more grounded conversations around fashion, especially when it comes to like sustainable ideas around that, from Page, going to Fashion Week in Paris and then writing about that and talking about it in a way, for me, wasn't necessarily about being sustainable. It was more about just the inclusive conversation I was having about Paris Fashion Week. Young Black kid from Brooklyn, going to Paris Fashion Week and just observing it, sitting front row and being out and about, but more importantly, talking about it in a way that people could relate to. And
and that's what was missing in the conversations in a lot of publications and magazines. I see that in your magazine and digital as well. The voice you use is representative of, and I don't want to just say it's Gen Z, but it's the representative of folks that are not representative in the fashion world, right? The customers, and you're using that voice. I want to really pull into this conversation here about who is this customer and what are they demanding, and what is it that the voice that you're giving through your magazine, and what is it about Culture Hub today that is one of the fastest growing online platforms that you're also part of? Can you share with us?
So with Culture Hub, teaming up with them, partnering with them was very like pivotal for Page, because Page essentially wants to still be I guess, talk to an older audience, you know, an audience that is willing to essentially spend in a sense that they can afford to buy a whole new wardrobe, you know, if over time, if anything. And Culture Hub is more for like people branching out into their adulthoods, you know, 18 and 24. And I saw the opportunity there to really like dive into the same type of voice, like you said, that I had when I spoke about Paris Fashion Week. It was, you know, referencing things that people, you know, I referenced Paris Fashion Week as, you know, going to high school, but without all the negative, you know, connotations we get from high school or negative things that happen to us in high school. I like Culture Hub because I get to talk about fashion and the things around it in a way that's very like, you know, familiar to that market, 18 and 24, the Gen Z market, the people, you know, who are just starting to work, maybe even in particular work in retail and start to understand that like fashion. And sometimes for someone that young, retail is the place to start, you know.
Right.
Because you get to be firsthand, you know, you get to see it every day, all day. My first job was retail, you know. I worked in Kings Plaza Mall in Brooklyn at a place called Epic, and you know, we sold like Baby Fat and G Unit and whatnot. But yeah, like that's usually where fashion starts, and that's the type of people we are talking to. So we get to be very, very like colloquial and you know, sound like a friend, you know, saying, hey, look what's cool to buy, but also it's sustainable, you know, like, you know, I get to do that there, and that kind of helps the voice of Paige too, and reach and branch out into that area and, you know, lead people back to like that conversation of circularity and sustainability, you know.
Yeah. So do you think that the notion of sustainability has really reached the customer in all different demographics, right? That they're very aware. I mean, the statistics show that over 80% of this generation to come will be doing research on the brands as it relates to their impact on people and planet, how they're doing good in the world. And so would you say that even the demographics of you know, not the rich, the ones that are up and coming are pushing the brands and really probably not even wanting to buy the famous house brands, but searching, seeking, inquiring, you know, really wanting to make themselves as the solution to climate change because of the huge notion, the huge awareness now that the fashion world is one of the biggest contributors of carbon emissions, as well as one of the most resource intensive. And so how do you feel about this through your conversations to consumers and your customers and your audience?
So, I mean, as far as the customer doing research, you know, it's 47% of like, you know, Gen Z shoppers like who actually use their phones as they're shopping, right? And with that, it's still not enough, you know, because at the same time, we've, you know, over a year we throw out 80 pounds of clothes. That's a lot, you know, and that's a lot of garments. And if one person, you know, two people in a room, one person is sustainable, the other person isn't, it's still not enough, you know?
Right.
And the research in general, like that the customer could do, I don't think like, you know, at this point, I don't think it's even like up to them, you know, like we definitely have people who are more aware, you know, of what's going on, but like there's still brands that are trying to, you know, weasel their way around certain things. And from that, like, you know, some customers, you know, you can't ask the people to do something that's hard enough, you know, but you can ask the brands to do something. So, you know, for the, you know, for that person who's shopping and who wants to, find something that is more sustainable or figure out ways. My thing is too, in relation to what you're asking, my thing is, and I say this a lot on a side note, it's about defining your style. It's like knowing who you are, as a individual in your clothes,
Right.
And when you do that, and this goes back to the favorite t-shirt thing, it's like if you have a favorite t-shirt, that's fine. It's like you work your way around that, but when you do find your style, ultimately, you essentially you cut the fat on what you usually, shop for and essentially throw out over time. Like, as far as being informed, like people are informed about quality garments, but if you don't take care of it, or if it's a trend for your style, yeah, the garment's going to go to waste regardless, So the waste is still there. And this is part of the circular conversation, is like, regardless of what you buy, do you maintain it, in ways that it can survive, and, still do you some service. And then when you know your style, you never have to keep up with trends. Therefore, you never have to throw out 80 pounds of
clothing.
And that
right.
is the circular side of it.
Right. Do you think there's enough education being done by brands to, provide opportunities for customers to make this into a circular business model? And what I mean by that is, let alone sustainability is a hard one for anyone to really define. Now we throw in the word circular fashion, which is instead of a take, make, waste model, which is what we're talking about now, we transition into designing for zero waste and pollution and extending the life as long as possible. As long as there's value in that clothing, there is a purpose for it. And that's so that we don't bring that in. But in order for our industries to, be impactful, how do you feel about more being done so that brands can show how to repurpose the clothing, right? How to donate wisely, how to repair. So these are, little options where it may not be so little after all, because if you do it cumulative, you're actually making a huge dent. And of course, seeing the up and coming market for secondhand clothing, right? I guess my question is, do you think brands are doing enough for this sort of awareness from sustainability all the way to circularity?
I think brands are doing as much as they can right now. Obviously it was a slow kind of creep to do that. And maybe that was part of the transition process and them being more aware, like, oh, maybe we need to do this or that. But I think a lot of brands are doing that because of generally, like in business, like the market is going towards that way. So you kind of want to be, at least in that lane, in that direction.
Right.
And there are plenty of brands that are still doing what was done, years ago and still going on. But, I think the brand's job is, producing, things that last, and that's what a lot of them have been doing. And on top of that, like I said, the brand can do with so much, and they should be doing as much as they can, for sure. As far as like translating that for the consumer to buy, that may be something, they probably, can work on even more. And then it's the consumer, and that is true. Like the brands do educate the consumers, and that's maybe where they need to do the work, But I think they're saying a lot, maybe not enough, maybe not doing the most because of tradition or however they operate normally. And maybe to do that is like a serious sidestep as well, to kind of get all of that like popping with the like circular kind of side of their business.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I when the Rana Plaza hit back in 2013, and there was this huge issue about how ethical brands are, and also how environmental, in terms of safety, right? And then now we have COVID. That was one issue that really propelled the discussion in the fashion industry. And now we have COVID. No doubt we're seeing some good positivity in terms of the climate, and we've understood that we are impacting it, with the drop in demand, huge drop in demand for clothing because it's not essential. All these workers being told that they may not have a job, including the fashion industries, and especially places like Bangladesh, which is the second largest in the world for export. The ethical part, right? The social part is also concerning because there are people who can't put food on the table, and they're dependent on fashion brands for their livelihoods. And when they cancel orders, this is what happens. Mm-hmm. This is a global phenomenon. It's just not happening in Bangladesh. It's happening all over the world, right? Here are two issues, as it relates to sustainability, as it relates to being a brand that is more conscious. So call it what you want. You want to call it sustainability, you want to call it being circular. There is a human component to this, right? And nobody wants to be touted as the brand that is doing this to any other human being. In your magazine and in your discussions, I know you've traveled the world. What are some of the issues that have come about in your content and with different brands as it relates to people and the treatment of people in the fashion world?
What are some of the issues?
Yeah, I mean the concern, right? The consumers are your audience are concerned about issues like this.
I think the most recent one I've been seeing a lot too is the Uruguay, is it?
Uruguay?
No, not Uruguay. In China, I have a hard time.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a hard time pronouncing it, but there's a lot of talk around that I've been privy to between some associates. And a lot of that has to do with was it H&M or was it Zara? But it was basically there's still issues with fast fashion. I don't know if you noticed as well, on social media, a lot of people have been I guess writing these open letters on their posts about how they're done with fast fashion. Mm-hmm. And that has a lot to do with that issue there in China. I'm going to get this name. So
yeah, I can't pronounce it myself, but I know what you're talking about. And it is an ethical issue, and one that it steeps really, really deep, right? The True Cost Fashion alluded to this in the movie, where people are not being paid right, and also not being treated, not being given a voice. And this is what we're talking about, with inclusivity. We're moving towards a world that needs to be inclusive, so that everybody gets credit where credit is due, and that's where we put value in. So it touches on yet another subject which I wanted to bring out in your discussions with brands. You recently, on one of your stories, you went to Portugal, right? Yeah. Can we discuss this about what you saw in Portugal? I mean, this was what, 2-3 months ago?
This was the end of September.
Okay, so you were, this is during COVID time, and you got to go to Portugal, and you met with some of the leaders in the cork industry, which is another sustainable material.
That was pretty interesting because one of the things that stood out to me the most when I was in Portugal was the fact that a lot of the a lot of everyday things were, you know, hats, shoes, fans, lighters, or whatever was made from cork. And, you know, through research, I found out like cork in that region of Europe is just like one of the main like crops, you know, and it happens to be like a very like regenerative crop where you kind of, I guess, to get cork, you scrape the bark off the tree and essentially you have the cork you need. And then 2 years later, the cork grows back on the tree. And so they've, you know, used cork for wine and champagne. And then when those pieces of cork are done, there's nothing to do with them. And they found ways to like just keep using cork over and over. And they made it into yarn with Corkatex, and Tintex also uses it as a finish over, you know, product, or, you know, within like the fabric and everything. But you know, for me, it was just something interesting, like even seeing like a jacket and full outfit made from cork. I was like, this material is pretty cool. It's like lightweight. It seems pretty durable. I don't know what it feels like per se on my skin, or on me rather. But the idea around it and the fact that it's available in this way, and, you know, if you think about it, it's kind of like just another cool way to make fashion.
Did you buy anything? Did you buy anything that was really cool?
Oh, I didn't want to go crazy. I used to buy a lot more stuff when I was traveling years ago, because I was more like, you know, just like really like wide-eyed. And then now I'm more like, all right, let me be reserved. Let me just like, I bought like a cork fan, like a, you know, like a Japanese like fan or something. But
nice.
Yeah, I had some other stuff I can't quite remember, but yeah, it was just, I didn't go crazy. I used to get like everywhere I should travel to.
Yeah. What do you remember some of the brands that were using cork at that time? Or I forget the ones that were new, but we've actually seen the introduction of cork here in the US. A lot of it, there's a big push, especially in the wine industry, they're using cork. But you know, you can turn that into like vests and jackets as well.
Yeah, so like, I mean, the cork, it's interesting because like I haven't seen it applied in any other context, you know.
They make bags out of it too, you know.
Yeah, they make like full bags out of it that bend and fold. Yeah, just like it's something like very interesting and a unique type of material to work with, and it looks cool. It's just, you know, something that is different, and if done right, I think, you know, people will be happy with, you know, and probably can do something with in you know, as we move forward with fashion and the you know, ideas around it. Some of the brands I saw that used it, Marita Morena.
Yeah, it's one of the most sustainable fabrics in the world because it can be repurposed over and over and over again. That's the other thing. That's what I was told.
They used it a lot. And then there's another company called Sensify. They make cork stuff out of their showroom. But yeah, it was just, to me, it was more about like, because there were other fabrics at the Motisimo event in Portugal, but the cork kind of really stood out to me because I saw it all over the city, you know, just kind of perusing around. But it's very sustainable, seemingly.
Do you think that the awareness of the people in Portugal and with sustainability is standing out? Like, was there any notion to think that they were any different from people here in California or?
No, I think globally the idea is kind of the same. I met brands that, you know, used 100% recycled material, brands that essentially, you know, kind of like flipped garments where the garment is two pieces in one, you know. So there was a lot of ideas around the same, you know, things here in the States.
Yeah. So I want to interject here. Dana and Reverie Page are launching this new survey for circular fashion. And you can take a look at this on their website. And Cassell, maybe you'll be able to share, maybe for customers and people who are wanting to contribute, we will be sharing these results next year. But there's a very short survey with 5 questions primarily. And the reason why we're doing this is, for this subject, and that is there is a way to repurpose clothing. And if you had that opportunity, how would you do it? And would you do it? And would you like to tell the stories of your clothing through memories? Because you get to repurpose it into new garments. And so this will help tremendously move the dial in the fashion industry as it relates to circularity. And so Paige and Dana have come together to ensure that we get some insights from the customers out there and the consumers out there looking for change to happen, to being the solution to climate change as well. Cassell, you want to add anything to that?
I think my thing is always to address the consumer, enlighten the consumer. I think that's where the problem will start and stop, For me, it's who I'm talking to, it's who I want informed about certain things. Because of, I guess, where I'm from and my upbringing and seeing, how, things revolved around fashion in a sense, but also like how the fashion was treated, like the care around it. I always use this analogy of like, you see a couple in New York City, like in the Upper West Side, and, regardless of whatever, the man is wearing a suit and jacket and hat he's had since the 50s maybe, and the woman is wearing the fur coat and the pearls and the shoes she has had since the 50s. And time has went on, and they obviously have a look to them that's very like they've been around, but for the most part, the idea around their style and obviously the quality of their clothes is like those remain. Like suits are still always in style, like, dressing up, the fur coat, and like things like that. It's like people have these discussions about fur coats too, and they're like, I understand the newer production, but I'm like, at the same time, I don't think it was a thing. It shouldn't be a thing to like just go out and buy a fur coat like every couple months or so.
Yeah, of course.
So it's like, if you have that coat and you like it and you value it, you keep it for 60 plus years or whatever, you pass it down, and that's the idea around that. The analogy is where it's like the style for them hasn't changed and they found their style. And at the same time, they took care of what they loved about their fashion, and today they still get to wear it. And to us, we still get to see like a beautiful pair and that's dressed nice. And if that's not a part of the fashion culture, I don't know what is.
Yeah, that's value there.
Yeah.
Right, it really is. I mean, that couple is a demonstration of what is timeless in many ways. Right. And if all of us can look at pieces of garments as much as possible, not just from an aesthetic point of view, but from a value standpoint, and how it could possibly be timeless, and people know you and sometimes can associate a certain piece of garment by a person, just like a sound, a soundtrack that conjures up a lot of memories, right? And so very similar to clothing and to fashion, right? And those are the conversations I think that I think fashion speaks to.
Yeah, no, for sure. Definitely. There's like a vault when, you have clothes that kind of take you back to a time, to a place, like I said, you get dressed for certain reasons. So it's always going to be, a thing. Like you think of the value in a wedding dress. You only wear it once.
Yeah. Apparently they're repurposing that even now, right?
Oh, well, that's new to me, you know,
Yeah,
like,
there's actually a wonderful, one or two wonderful brands that we've come across. There's this wonderful competition called Redress, the Redress competition, Redress. It's coming out of Hong Kong, believe it or not. So every year, this might be an anomaly because of COVID. They challenge designers all over the world to come up with designs made out of waste, or you can't print anything new. And so some of these designers have realized that they can go to lace and pull from vintage as well as current wedding dresses and make new pieces out of that. And it's actually really gorgeous. It's stunning. It's absolutely stunning. And so that gave me so much inspiration that their design is already thinking like this, right? And creating new collections, which is fantastic. And I think that's going to be happening in the future, where we see a lot of designers coming out with designs, but the material choice might be yours as a customer. It's just you see these beautiful styles coming out. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of different ways to go about addressing the solutions to sustainability as well, and then also to like creating garments that people want to hold on to for a long time because of that sentimental value, and I hate to do this, but I go back to kind of what I said, where it's like when you know your style, like almost every piece you own has that value.
Yeah.
Like, this is the jacket I wear when I'm going here, or this is what I wear when I'm doing that, or this is my weekend, whatever, look, coat, shoe. I don't know.
Absolutely. And you know what, Cassell, the technology is also coming where we call it the virtual personal assistant, right? It's your Siri, but exponentially smarter, a lot more savvy. We'll be able to tell you that jacket you're wearing over there, you've just worn that, for the last 10 times in these places, and it'll just give you all that. That's all coming. That's in the works already.
I think when I went to Fashion Week in New York, I ran into a company like that where they were placing some sort of tag or D-tag in the tag of the collar. And they expressed like some sort of ideas around that as well. And like tracking garments so like they don't end up in like landfills or something like that.
Absolutely. There's Avery Dennison, Eon. They all have this. That's what it is. And we're hoping to have that for our circular memory jacket too, so people can actually understand their memories in that way. It's a really good one. Coming back, we're at the end of the year 2020. It's a very pandemic question to ask. Everyone's asking this. What have you learned, from fashion in 2020, this pandemic year, and then some of the highlights that was really not only just surreal, but what has brought to the forefront in your customer base? And congratulations to the book, the coffee book.
Thank you.
For sure. I'm going to give a big shout out. The second one is coming out, so be part of it. It's online now. But what have you actually heard from your audience about this year?
Say it again.
This year, what are some of the highlights about in fashion?
From this year.
Yeah.
I think for the most part, the highlight is like you realize the fragility of the fashion industry. You realize the fragility, but you also realize how much you kind of value it. You definitely see people now taking to fashion. I mean, in all other industries as well, but like taking to fashion with a more intellectual approach, a more empathetic approach, and without the daily getting dressed, going out, being seen, putting on that armor, you realize how much you don't essentially want it to be a thing that, becomes like a bland idea. Like, you kind of, people were inside and wearing sweats, they're uninspired, and this is the person that's used to wearing florals and, big shoulders. And it's just like, if, that gives you, the energy you need to live, like you're not doing that right now. Not to say that won't happen again, but right now that sometimes that's what it takes. You take a moment to like really like understand like, oh wait, we don't need all this fashion. But then at the same time, it kind of breathes life into our existence, and if we don't need fashion in the sense that, we're not doing anything, going anywhere, do these magazines exist? Do these events around fashion, like whether it be digital or when things are physical, like do they still exist? And those are the type of things like fashion can do. It just brings people together. That's why, like you'll see people who dress the same hang out because they have the same fashion sense. There's a lot of things associated with, fashion in a social construct, and we saw that this year, and how, after a while we're like, all right, I'm still going to do my makeup to get on Zoom. I'm still going to wear that shirt, or I'm going to look presentable.
Right.
One of the things about, even like being a freelancer is like, I always, try to better my productivity is like, it'll say like, when you do work from home, get up, shower, put on clothes, because that's going to give you this sense of like, okay, I'm accomplishing things today, not to say you got to do that every day.
Right.
But, it's like most of the time, like that's going to be a signal to you, the same way you get dressed when you go to a party or something, there's going to be a signal to you like, all right, there's a little bit more confidence, a little more assertiveness in my day, but we definitely saw that it was something we didn't need. At the same time, it was something that we do need to value more.
Yeah. No, that's great. We have a question here from Dia, and she says, thanks for a discussion. I found it very interesting. I'm interested in lowering the cost of sustainable fashion and make it more accessible through repair and refitting old clothes. Are there any hurdles on the consumer side you see here? And what other simple solutions are you seeing to solve this problem?
To lower the cost of sustainable fashion, I think that's a question of manufacturing. That would be something, depending on the process. Is it, taking it down to the fibers, or is it something about rearranging what's currently, on the garment, and I think, those would be your hurdles, to be honest,
I know, I would second that, it's not
that's
just, go ahead.
Yeah, it's not about like even slashing prices. It's about, to essentially you're either going to do, I don't know, like sell secondhand, because when it comes time to repair and refitting, that's a lot of labor, and that's where a lot of that conversation will happen around the sustainable part. And is it something you do like a customizable thing, or is it something of kind of a wholesale ordeal?
Yeah, I truly believe the answer is for consumers to demand more of it as well. With social media, you can do that. And through surveys that we're about to do as well. We're launching this survey. Show your and make your voice represented. The more we hear from consumers that they want things that are sustainable, that they want to be seeing fashion circular, then they don't have a choice. Brands don't have a choice but to answer that. I mean, look at the secondhand market. It's over $51 billion now. Right? Who would have thought, right? Yes, we hear that Gen Zs and Millennials are really into retro and nostalgia and doing things, but there are other avenues about repurposing clothes. So it's definitely a consumer driving this at this point. So where are you going to focus your attention? By the way, I don't think I actually asked you this. What is the demographic of Culture Hub today, and also Reverie page, and where is it going for 2021?
The demographic for Reverie page and Culture Hub, well, like I said before, Reverie page is more of a 35 to 25-year-old audience, someone who, obviously it's a coffee table book. So you have a space where, you value it and you're going to be there for some time. You obviously value like certain like trinkets in your life, and then Culture Hub is more about, this, kind of this journey for creativity, and search to kind of like find your purpose. So the ideas with them kind of align. It's just that, Reverie page is more in the front line. Culture Hub 18 and 24 is more of the bringing in the rear, like Gen Z is literally bringing in the rear of the generations before. So the job of Reverie is to kind of teach, talk to, advise, mentor, tutor, what's going on at Culture Hub, just with almost like a refinement to the textbook that people are, especially like if someone that's still in school, essentially like a Culture Hub reader. It's like break the textbooks, learn something in a whole different way.
Yeah.
Here's a very jargon way to kind of spell out these kind of stats or history, pieces of history, like for example too, like I just published an article about Caribbean inspired photography and street style. And for me, that was more about like, I can point out the different types of Caribbean styles, mainly because I'm from Brooklyn. There's a lot of Caribbean people here. My family's Caribbean. I can notice it. The thing about it was, let me not just point out like these photographers or like, here's what street style looks like Caribbean. It was about like, let me spell some information about where it's coming from fashion wise, with Caribbean fashion in particular. Who's representing Caribbean fashion on a celebrity scale? What places do you experience Caribbean fashion? I talked about the Labor Day parade here in Brooklyn, and how photographers like Jamel Shabazz have been photographing that for years, and kind of was born into it moving from Harlem to Brooklyn. And like simple things like that can cue people into like, oh, I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. Because when I'm doing the research, I didn't know that, you know?
I think it's wonderful that it's so global. I think, and your reach is global, correct? For the magazine as well.
Yeah.
When I saw that story, I was so inspired that, we get these wonderful stories about people and places all over the world that embrace fashion with nature. And in turn, we ourselves get inspired to do the same by bringing others and other conversations into play. We're not very different after a while, right? We really aren't. I mean, all cultures wear clothes. All cultures are inspired by nature. All cultures have the basic colors that we all share, right? There's the palette is all the same. It's just how we put it together and the stories we tell. So I think that is so important here.
Yeah, no, that was exactly what the Caribbean melting pot was all about, in the years prior to. But yeah, like it's that kind of conversation that I'm aiming to have around fashion. That is something too that people can look at and say like, what does that tell me about myself and my style? Like, am I into this? And this is something as simple as that. The simple idea around it is like, as popular as it may be in certain places, or even worldwide, it's just like, oh, we didn't think of that. And it's just like, that's good. That's good. That means you learned something, and that broadens your horizon and, gets you to a place where, you open up, a lot more.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you brought that up, Cassell, because fashion has that ability to connect us to people and planet all over the world, right? We put a piece of garment on ourselves every day that has that power. And if only we just paused for a moment and reflected on that. I know this is this is definitely the mission of Dhana, which is to empower the customer to connect through the medium of fashion. Thank you so much for being here on this webinar of the road, the next 30 years towards circular fashion 2050. Your voices will be heard across the globe. NewChip will be distributing this across the globe through the various channels. And hopefully the powers that be through fashion hear the change and also be able to embrace what creative voices there are across the globe in the bond of inclusivity. So again, I thank you so much. Appreciate your voice and being here. For those online, please go on to Reverie page. We will also be sharing the link to the survey on this webinar, and it will be running for the next 60 days. All the very best, and here's to a bright and beautiful decade of 2021. Thank you, Cassell, and thank you to everyone. Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.